Seahawks fans, wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football.
Hey, Seahawks fans. Welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down with co-host Keith Myers, here to talk about Geno Smith and
the contract situation.
The last few shows, we've kind of set this up. We've gone through all the position groups on the roster to kind of know where we're at. We've taken a look at the overall cap space that the Seahawks have. We've established that currently is sitting at $31 million and change. But the effective cap space comes down from there when we have to tender certain players and then allocate for the NFL draft in April. Lots of things in between where they can massage contracts, cut players, restructure, etc. So this is all kind of moving, if you will. But the Geno Smith contract equation in this is probably the most important piece to figure out where everything else fits in the offseason. And if you want to kind of just set this thing up, the parameters of the discussion, if you will, that would be great.
Yeah, because you and I have kind of been taking a different look at this from the beginning. Is you seem to be looking at this as a whoever Geno's going to play for next year is going to be getting a top tier quarterback because he played like a top 10 quarterback this year. And
that's my position for the show, but that's not necessarily how I feel as a person.
No, but you do feel that somebody's going to pay him, right?
Yes and no.
Okay.
Yeah. But for the sake of this show, I want to take the high end of what he could possibly fetch in the market, whether that's with the Seahawks or with another team.
Okay. So, anyways, as you were saying with the cap, the Seahawks have 31 million now. If they franchise tag Geno Smith, that costs about 32 million, which means they would use up all their cap space plus $1 million of wiggle room that they've already got, and only have 40 some players on the roster. They still need all of their draft picks to sign and fill the rest of the 90-man roster. It is not something that they're in position right now to go out and do. And it makes life challenging for them to be in this position, because what you've got Geno Smith, who had a good year, was a top 10 quarterback this year, kind of unexpectedly, to be honest. And by kind of, I mean extremely unexpectedly. And then, but now he's a free agent, and his backup, Drew Lock, is a free agent. The Seahawks have no quarterbacks under contract for this year. So they've got to figure this out.
Yeah, I think, the parameters of this discussion are: how well did Geno play? What is his value? Can he win a Super Bowl for you? What is his age window given the contract? Does that align with where Pete's at and the rest of the roster, et cetera? There's a lot of moving parts again in there, but the key thing is, can you win a Super Bowl with Geno, and what is it going to cost to have Geno back on the roster? And there's a couple different scenarios, I think, for me, where the team kind of decides what they want to do. I think optimally, the team would move in the direction that you'll probably spend the majority of the show talking about, which is allow Geno maybe to explore the market, or at least establish what the market is before the franchise tag day is established, or the end of the franchise ability to franchise a player is, because you want to know kind of where you're going to negotiate from. I think they're probably having loose conversations now. I think the Seahawks probably said, this is where we want to come in. Geno's camp says, this is probably where we want to be. Now they need to hear from, around the league, kind of what's going on, who might be in play, who needs quarterbacks, et cetera, to establish that market If there is no market, that favors Seattle, obviously. I think Geno would come back on a reasonable deal, either a 1-year deal, mostly guaranteed, or a 2 or 3 year deal where first year cap hit is really low and it goes up substantially in year 2, year 3. But that's when the cap also is going up. They have a lot more room for contracts in those years. So on the high end, the worst possible case scenario for me, I'm going to argue this case, but I'm not in favor of it because it would be a disaster for the franchise. But the best case scenario for Geno is that there is a market out there. There's 2 or 3 other teams competing for his services. The franchise tag value right now is at about $32 million. That's kind of their starting point for negotiations, because if it's not Seattle, it's going to be somebody else. And so that puts Seattle kind of in a conundrum. If you use the franchise tag, that's fully guaranteed. That's $32 million. That ruins your cap ability and flexibility this year, especially if you can't reach a longer term agreement with him to lower that 2023 cap hit. And I just don't feel like they're going to go down that road, but you never know what's going on, in the NFL front office with John Schneider and company. I don't think it would be wise to do that, but it's a possibility. That's why we're going to talk about it on the show. Financially, it would be extremely difficult for Seattle to franchise him and make other moves to build the roster. If they can reach an agreement with Geno and get his cap hit, around $10 million, maybe 12, I think you'll probably have this discussion. You can maneuver the cap around, cut some players, restructure in order to be able to have Geno still make a draft pick, possibly a quarterback, as well as sign some free agents to still make your roster better in 2023. So that's basically the parameter of this thing.
Yeah. So I think where we should start this is because one of the things that you and I seem to be on different sides of is will there be a market for Geno Smith? And you seem to think that there is. And I'm on the side that I don't think honestly, outside of Seattle, I don't think there will be.
Yeah, honestly, I can't really completely answer that truthfully, but for the sake of this argument, yes, I think that there will be a market out there. I don't know how big it will be, but I think there's 3 or 4 teams out there that are pretty desperate for quarterbacks, 2 of which are going to be covered in the draft if they want to take a young, unproven guy. And then there's 3 or 4 other teams that are outside the top 10 or outside that first 3 or 4 or 5 picks that may want to try to move into that. If they don't feel that they can be successful in acquiring a lower pick to grab one of these premier quarterbacks, they may be in the market to go out and find a free agent quarterback. There's not that many available out there. And Geno's one of the top 2 quarterbacks on the market right now.
There's going to be a bunch of quarterbacks who are available this offseason. Just as oddly there was last season when we saw Russell Wilson move and Matt Ryan and some other guys. You're going to see Derek Carr move in this offseason. Mm-hmm. Brett Favre's talking about redoing his contract to help it be traded. And
who did you just say?
I just said Brett Favre, and I meant Aaron Rodgers.
Oh my gosh, that is going way back machine right now.
I'm old, you can tell. There's going to be Jimmy Garoppolo is guaranteed to hit the market because they can't franchise him or anything. Yeah. Trey Lance may be available for trade.
Baker Mayfield, Teddy Bridgewater, Daniel Jones, etc.
Yeah, Daniel Jones is another one. Young player, had some good moments, had some iffy moments. Also doesn't play on a team with a lot of talent around him. So we don't know as far as what people think of him. But you look at...
but I will say this. Hold on. I will say this. Out of all those names, Baker, some of those names are realistic. Some of them aren't. Those that are true free agents, unrestricted free agents, Baker Mayfield, Sam Darnold, Jimmy Garoppolo, Daniel Jones, and Geno Smith. That's your list. Everything else is kind of a, secondary market guys, backups, career backups in the league, obviously. Geno Smith was that
Carr and
before.
Rodgers are not
But you got to trade. You have to.
Yes, but if you're training for a franchise quarterback, if the ability to go get a franchise quarterback, nobody cares about the trade to go get them. You just go get them.
That's a lot. I mean, you're talking to those guys. Those are premier guys, and there's the value of that trade back to those teams is going to be substantial. I'm just talking about guys that are going to be available where you don't have to invest also draft picks and capital to get them. Yeah, and Geno's on top of that list is all I'm saying. I'm looking at Jimmy Garoppolo, Baker Mayfield, Geno Smith. Which quarterback out of those three would you like to have running your team in 2023 if your team's sort of built and you're ready to win or at least bridge? Geno might be the guy. He could be in play in those conversations.
Okay. So now that under those parameters, which team? Who is a quarterback away, has the roster built? They're a quarterback away that's willing to pay Geno Smith, a guy who's been a career disaster until 1 year, and go out and have a GM put their career on the line by signing Geno Smith to a $37 million a year contract.
Yeah. I mean, that is the question, isn't it? I mean, you got the Jets, his old team. You've got, obviously the Las Vegas Raiders are going to move on. They're looking possibly in the draft, but also may want to inquire about a veteran, Atlanta Falcons, Carolina Panthers, et cetera. I mean, there are some teams there.
None of those teams are ready to compete. I mean, the Jets, but he won't go back to the Jets. That was not a good.
We don't know what's going to happen with Tua. He sounds like he's going to be cleared to play, but they may want another situation there that's steady and more dependable. Chicago might trade their quarterback, and then what do they do at the top of the draft? Do they go get a new one, or do they get a guy that can come in and play? Washington Commanders.
Chicago's either going to play Fields or they're going to play,
New Orleans, Indianapolis. We've talked about that. Their roster is not great, but it's not horrible.
None of these teams that you're talking about are ready to compete, where they're ready to go spend the money.
Seattle Seahawks. So there are teams.
The Commanders are probably the only one, and they have to find a way to get out from underneath the terrible Carson Wentz deal that they signed, because they're going to have so much cap space tied up into that terrible contract that they probably can't afford to go out and spend another $30 million. The thing is that you look at the market, and then all the teams that you listed, none of them are a quarterback away from being competitive. All of them are in rebuild mode. And so signing a 33-year-old quarterback to a $30-some million contract makes none of these teams are in that market.
And some of the reason why some of these teams are in this market is because they don't have great front offices and make mistakes. Now, and Geno Smith could be that mistake. I'm not saying it's impossible. I'm just saying those are the teams. Yes, all those teams have issues. Are they one player away? Probably not. And sometimes those teams are with the largest cap space available as well, and have money to spend, and could potentially facilitate something like this. So that's all I'm saying. I'm not saying it's a strong argument, Keith. I'm just saying that those are the teams that are going to be in play. Those are the teams that are in play in the draft. Those would be the teams that, if they don't successfully do anything in free agency, would be in the draft to try to maneuver. So, and it's not. It doesn't look like a strong market. I agree with you.
It's not a good market for him, because there are teams that need quarterbacks. It's a good draft for the quarterbacks, and the teams that need them are in position to draft one. He's older.
One half of year of proven success over average.
He had one half of a great, fantastic, phenomenal season. That being the first half of this last year. He had one half where he was good, and then he's got 8 seasons of either being a backup and not playing, or being terrible. The track record isn't there, and so no team that's ready to make that playoff push, and get it needs a quarterback in a Geno Smith. That's my biggest thing. So I don't think there's a market.
I agree with that. So is one good season or half a good season of Geno Smith worth it to the Seahawks to throw out whatever plan they had when they dealt Russell Wilson, because that plan went out the window too when Geno started playing better. And are they still on that track?
I don't think the plan went out the window.
Are they still on that track to complete that vision with whatever vision they had prior to Geno Smith having a pretty decent year? They were going to be probably heavily into this quarterback market, whether it was free agency or the draft in 2023, based on the way that they've handled their salary cap and where they're at. It seems like they were counting on a rookie contract.
Yeah, and Geno Smith having a fantastic year did not derail that plan, because Denver unexpectedly had a terrible season. And so Seattle, with their draft picks, are sitting at the top, near the top of the draft too, with the 5th overall pick. It was kind of expected that Seattle would be, in there in the top 5, and then Denver would be down in the 20s. But okay, those two teams are flipped, but it doesn't change the fact that the plan can still move forward as far as where they are. So I think that when you look at all of this, there's not going to be a huge market for Geno. The $30 million a year, I think, is absurd for him. You look at across the league and you start looking at contracts.
I don't know if it's absurd. I think that's the wrong word. I think that
I think it is.
I think it would be absurd too if I'm a Seahawks guy, but if I'm looking league wide, you got to look at the mid-tier market for quarterbacks out there. Derek Carr, $40 million cap hit. Dak Prescott, $40 million. Stafford, marker. $40 million. Kirk Cousins, $35. Mid-tier. Jared Goff. These are mid-tier. The upper guys are making close to 50. This is the 15th ranked salary of quarterbacks right now is $32 million.
Tom Brady, 25, Baker Mayfield, 15, Jameis Winston, 14, Marcus Mariota, 9.3. Dude, these are all guys in their second contract.
Those are all guys that Geno Smith outperformed.
Oh, okay.
Like by a wide margin, and has predictors in his performance that say that is
ready for this.
You can duplicate Geno's performance widely, So I think that when you take a look at Carson Wentz, Matt Ryan, Ryan Tannehill at 29.5, that's a good barometer right there, Ryan Tannehill.
Let me give you the stats of 2 different players. Completion percentage, 61.3 or 62.8. Touchdown percentage, 4.9 and 4.1. Interception percentage, 3.4, 3.0. Yards per pass attempt, 7.7 or 7.1. And completion or quarterback rating, 87.5 and 84.8. Which of those 2 players, the first one or the second one, would you rather have on your team? Oh, and also I should say the first player is 3 years younger than the other one.
And what are their salaries?
Sorry, 4 years younger. No, that's not. I'm just saying, which of those 2 players would you rather have?
They're essentially equal.
They're not. The first player I listed is better in every single category except for he threw a couple more interceptions.
Yeah,
and he's 4 years younger. Yeah. That first player is Jameis Winston's career. The second player is Geno Smith's career. He's 4 years older and he's worse in every single category except for he's thrown a fewer interceptions. He's also taken more sacks.
And that's why you can't do this in a vacuum. You can't just look at stats. Stats don't tell the whole entire story. Would you rather have on your team, Geno Smith or Jameis Winston? Dude.
If you're not a Seahawks fan,
you still wouldn't want Jameis Winston on your team because he can't win. He makes huge mistakes all the time.
You have no desire to have Geno Smith line up for under center for you.
Well, if he had the season he had in the first half of the year, you could make an argument that he could. He dashed hopes for a lot of Seahawks fans and myself in that second half where things really fell off and he became league average in almost every category except for completion percentage. He was still
but even
and you can make the argument, I'll give you this. You can make the argument that he could have had 7 or 8 more interceptions because
Easy.
he had turnover worthy plays that ended up not being turnovers because his turnover worthy conversion rate usually in the NFL is about 80%. Geno Smith's conversion worthy plays turned into turnovers only 37%. He literally beat the league average by 50% just by luck, basically. If he were to make those plays all the time,
hitting the defender,
it would have been even worse.
And drop it,
right? Or a play called back by penalty, etc., which happened.
Mm-hmm. Happened a lot.
Hey, listen, I'm right there with you on all that. But what I'm trying to establish for our listeners and for us is his value. And I just think in today's market, contracts have gone up every year. You take a look at the guys I've listed: Ryan Tannehill, Carson Wentz, Jared Goff, Kirk Cousins. They keep paying him there in Minnesota for not winning or being able to take him to a Super Bowl. I don't know why, but Geno's kind of in that bucket. Maybe you could say he's on the low end of that. That's fine. It still puts him at around 30.
I have a hard time putting him in that bucket because all of those guys signed those deals. Like Jared Goff, you're looking at 33. He signed that right after taking his team to the Super Bowl. He was a young quarterback about to become a free agent, just had gone to the Super Bowl, and they signed him to this crazy deal.
Also 4 years ago.
That was what the market was.
It's gone up since then.
Yeah, and his play doesn't
correct. I know, but what I'm saying is for the market for Geno, I think is up higher than we might think it is because that's just the way it is.
The market for Geno is going to be where what is someone willing to pay him?
What are the Seahawks willing to pay Geno? Keith?
The last quarterback with similar stats to him that signed a contract would be Jameis Winston at $14 million a year.
What do you John Schneider came out, I think it was John, that it came out and said, listen, we've got a bottom line here where we're not going to exceed. What is that number, do you think?
That for them, probably 20.
Okay. I was thinking that you might say 25 just because
they don't have the cap room. They can't field
they do, because you can structure a contract where the first year cap hit is 10, but the second year cap hit, third year cap hit is 35 or whatever. You put bonus money in there, guaranteed money, et cetera, and maybe you lift up the guarantees and you lower the cap and in it. I'm just saying there is a scenario where you can still pay Geno average APY 25 and make it work in the cap and still build the roster, draft a quarterback, bridge with Geno. My only question, I guess, my real question is, can you win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith? My answer is no. I think your answer is no as well. Can you bridge to a rookie for 2024 with Geno Smith? My answer is yes. I think yours would be too.
Absolutely. But you don't pay a bridge quarter $30 million.
Yeah, I know. What's the number?
You don't pay a bridge quarter $30 million. You play a bridge quarter 15. And again, that's the market.
Is that a 1 year deal? 15 mil 1 year, or do you try to bridge that over a couple of years? Lower the first year cap.
It would be a 2 year deal with the contract structured in a way you can cut or trade him after 1 year.
How far off? Look in your crystal ball and be self-aware and say how far off you think that is going to be based on what it ends up being.
Oh, I think I think 20 million. That's why I said that is.
You said 15.
I said 15 is what I would pay a bridge quarterback. That's what a bridge quarterback is worth. Mm-hmm. That's what his career stats actually aren't worth that. But with the idea that he played half a season of much better than his career stats, and so there's some thought there that it's going to be good. Like there's 20 million is kind of the max. 15 is what you pay that quarterback though, and the only reason why you don't pay him, or that you don't pay him 15 and have to go to 20, is if there's a market for his services,
or you let him walk.
Well, that's the thing is there a market for his services on other teams? And I think that's what we went through. Other than the Washington Commanders, there's no team with a roster ready to win.
And do they make the same mistake they just made?
With Carson Wentz, where they went and traded for a guy who had one really good year and otherwise was pretty mediocre, and then realized that the one good year was the fluke, not the not the thing that they just made that mistake, and they don't have the cap space to do anything because they're stuck with their mistake.
Yeah.
So
and Indianapolis is stuck. I mean, they've got their, Matt Ryan is there. He's probably not going to be back, but they're stuck with his dead cap space. Okay, so let's say, for argument's sake, now we've settled in on your plan, because to be completely honest, I was never completely in on my plan. I just wanted to present that side. I think, unfortunately, I believe that the Seahawks value Geno a little bit more than we do, not just based on stats, but based on who he is, the leadership factor, the value to the franchise as far as being a quarterback that could take them forward 1 to 3 years, depending on what they do with a rookie quarterback in the draft, if they draft one. If they don't draft one, his value goes up even more. So that will be telling as well. But I'm thinking 25 is the top figure, APY. Now they could get that down to 15 or 12 or whatever in the first year. I think I could live with that. I could live with a contract that gets the first year cap down to a number where we still can solve some problems on the roster, and draft a quarterback and get out of
it after 1 year.
Yeah.
If they can get out of if they can get out of the contract after 1 year, then AYP doesn't matter. And the only thing that matters is the salary in year one.
What if you could get out of the contract after 1 year, but it hit you like with a $18 million dead cap figure or something like that? Would you still do the deal?
As long as the cap savings was more, I probably wouldn't. That's probably too much.
Because that's probably what they would have to do.
Yeah. See, that's too much. Because that's more than his value on the open market is in dead money in year two. So you're not gaining anything by going to a quarterback on the rookie deal if you've got $18 million of dead.
You'd have 4 years remaining on that rookie deal, and Geno would be off the books after 2024. So,
I know, but I'm just saying in that year, you're not gaining anything.
True. That's very true.
And so you've got to structure a Geno Smith contract as one that you want him to be your bridge, and you want to give him and his agent that talking point and make it look huge with a big number, but you want it structured in a way that you can get out of it after a year. You pay him not that much, and it doesn't kill you as far as dead cap room in year two. You do that by not pushing a lot of stuff into future years, by giving a huge signing bonus and having it spread out. You guarantee his entire 2023 salary, every penny of it, up to $12 million. And you give him a $6 million signing bonus. And then and every year after that, doesn't matter. It doesn't matter.
So I think you're wrong. I just think that you're undervaluing this whole situation. There are so many people out there talking about $30 million as being his value. Over the cap has got him valued at $35 million. There's pundits out there all over the place that are talking about Geno getting at least where his starting negotiation is at the franchise tag at $32 million. I'm just saying it. I'm just the communicator here. I'm not actually believing this, but there are so many out there saying this.
Yeah, where is that information coming from?
Exactly. Where is this inside information?
And everybody's got the same set of numbers. Where is this crazy, this number? Where is it coming from? Because guys aren't making it up. It's coming from his agent, because that's the way the industry works. The way the industry works is an agent comes to you and says, hey, this is what we're doing. This is what we're planning. Go ahead, publish that. And you go, that seems like kind of shady. But I also know that same agent is going to be able to give me something next month, or when we're getting close to free agency, that's going to be really nice for me. really nice for my ability to
So
publish.
if you had to put a confidence barometer on this in a percentage, how confident are you that it's going to be a $15 million contract?
I think it's going to be 20. At 15 is pretty low. 20 is really high. 31 is 4%.
What would
3%.
you do as a Seahawk fan and a podcaster if the Seahawks came in at 4 years, $120 million with $60 million guaranteed?
I'm flipping a freaking desk, because that is franchise suicide. That is saying we're going to try and win in 2023. And
That's exactly what that says.
And we don't care if we are a bottom feeder in the league for the 3 years after that. And this team has never been one that wants to be a bottom feeder, because
it would be a huge mistake. It would be an astronomical mistake for them to do this. I'm just saying that's where the chatter is out there on this thing. You could say it comes all from his agent, and you're probably at least 90% correct. But there are other things and arguments that can be made. They're not strong arguments. I'm just saying that there are arguments out there that can be made that puts his valuation higher than what we're estimating. And if the Seahawks are in on that, it's doomsday for the immediate future of the franchise, because you're going in on a quarterback that's not going to get you any more wins. His already wins over expectation is already at 2 or 3. That's not going to increase. It is likely to decrease if he plays like the back half of the year he just finished. And you haven't done anything to improve the roster in other key areas in free agency. In fact, the rest
will be worse, because
you had to cut people and not replace people, right? So now you're depending on the draft, which is a horrible way to build a roster in its entirety, because now you lack any veteran presence in really key spots.
And if you miss on one draft pick, now you have this gaping hole on the field, because these guys are playing.
Right.
You've got to
you doom your salary cap in future years.
Yeah. So you got to cut a whole bunch of guys and have the franchise bottom out for a year, and then you went through that. That was last year.
So I asked you at the end of the last show, I said, okay, give me your philosophy on roster building and what makes the most sense for this franchise with this situation and into 2024, 2025. What did you tell me?
So you've got to build this team. This team is young, with the exception of like a couple of players and their quarterback. They're a really young team. You build this team in the same way that the Bills built their team around Josh Allen. And you go young, you operate with a cheap quarterback on their rookie deal, and you use the advantages created by that to stockpile talent, and you get your roster in place where it is deep everywhere.
Yeah. You don't make the same mistake you just got out of with Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
You just got out of a major contract that was handicapping your ability to build the roster. And now you're going to go into another situation like that with a lesser quarterback that can't get you all the way there. Why would you then invest a 3-year deal with him at some astronomical number? It doesn't make any sense. And then it would ruin you, moving forward. And you're right. It would be a win now thing without the ability to win now. Yeah. You'd be missing too many other pieces.
There is one other thing that I think needs to be said, and this actually has come out, and you see the guys that are writing with more sources on the team side than on the agent side, and they're talking about how quarterback friendly the system is. And the system did well with Russell Wilson. Now Russell Wilson moves on and looks terrible, and now the system is doing really well with Geno Smith, who has a career of terrible in the past. How much of that is Geno and how much of that is the system? You look at this is essentially the same system that they're running in San Francisco, where they had it going with Trey Lance. He gets hurt. They bring in Jimmy Garoppolo. It doesn't slow down. It goes, keeps rolling. He gets hurt, goes down, and they bring in Mr. Irrelevant and it's like nothing changed.
And
Right?
this last playoff game was a perfect illustration of what you're talking about when he faced Dak Prescott, and Dak looked like crap. They're paying him $40 million to look like crap. Brock Purdy comes in at $789,000 and steals the show, and hasn't lost the game as a professional yet. So it is interesting. And they did come out and say exactly what you just said, that they believe, and Pete Carroll came out and said this, they believe that the system is quarterback friendly, which was kind of a nice way to say, hey, Geno, we can do it with somebody else if we have to.
The thing is, it's true. And Brock Purdy is a great illustration of, hell, you know what? Baker Mayfield with the Rams this year was a great example of that. Because again, the Rams and the Seahawks and the 49ers all play an extremely similar system as far as offense. And Baker Mayfield comes in from, being cut, being released, gets claimed off waivers by the Rams, comes in, and within a week is out there leading this team and looking better than he's looked at any other point in his career.
So
he doesn't even know the protections or anything. It's because the system makes him look good.
Okay, let's say Geno signs for 20, or he's gone. Let's say he's gone. Okay. Went out, signed a better deal somewhere else. Somebody paid him. Good for Geno.
For him. Awesome.
Now where does the franchise go? Do you look at Drew Lock as to be? I mean, obviously it's Drew or it's somebody else. There's a number of guys out there on the market. Else.
You say Drew Lock, he's got starting experience. Let's let him be our bridge quarterback at $2.5 million a year or whatever. And it's nothing. And then you go draft a guy. And the expectation is that by the time the week 1 rolls around, the drafted guy is starting.
Or you get a more established bridge guy.
So like
for $10 million, something like that. Yeah. Marcus Mariota, et cetera. Probably not Derek Carr type level, but mid-level, mid-tier, borderline starter,
So Geno Smith.
But Geno's obviously, I think, outplayed his ability to be just a borderline starter backup. I think he's slightly elevated from that. For half a season,
half of one season.
Yeah, I actually think that. Not that I completely buy into that, because I saw the whole season up close and personal, but I'm saying that's where the market is. And I don't know. Yeah, because
you look at
what if it was true what you just said? Why would Seattle pay him any more than $3.5 million with $3.5 million in incentive again if you didn't have a market? He's obviously done something to get a raise.
Yes.
A substantial raise.
He has. He played phenomenally for the first half of the year.
So I don't want to short him here. I mean, it sounds like we think Geno's at the bottom of the barrel here, and he's not.
He's not. But the question is, he doesn't have a track record. He's a 32-year-old quarterback without a track record.
And that's what makes this entire conversation so interesting.
And you know who that makes him is Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's Ryan. You have to think of him as Ryan Fitzpatrick. He's an older quarterback who has flashes, like not as flashes where it's like a game where I know a few plays, but flashes where it's like a stretch of games where he looks just scary good, and then regresses. And it was Ryan Fitzpatrick who came out and said that Geno Smith won't get more than $20 million a year.
That is true. I will say this about Geno, and we can kind of wind this thing up. It wasn't all his doing, the fall off. A team schemed against him, didn't get a lot of scheming back.
Wasn't all his doing the great play in the first half of the year.
He was pretty good.
He was, but he also benefited from perhaps the league's best running game in that same stretch.
Right, but you have to also admit too that the running game fell off, and it wasn't his fault, and it was probably more due to our interior offensive line, which was an issue all year.
Yeah.
that Geno had to kind of contend with there.
No, I'm just agreeing with you that the problems in the second half of the season were not all on Geno, but the strengths in the first half of the season were not all on Geno either. Right? He's not as good as he looked in the first half, and he's not as bad as he looked in the second half. I still think he's
even with that second half fall off, he still finished top 10 statistically in 4 or 5 different categories.
And overall, I'd say he's somewhere between 8 and 12. So average that out and call him, the 10th best quarterback as far as his season. But he's 32. He's going to be 33 next year. He's had one good year. You're basing all of your value on what you're going to put on him on one season when he was
that's where the mistake would lie. Right. That's where you can't make that mistake as a franchise.
And that's why Ryan Fitzpatrick came out and said he won't make more than 20 million, because having been that guy who comes in for a few games and just lights up the scoreboard and looks great, somebody signs him to a big contract and he regresses back to himself. And then he gets cut because the contract's too big, and he goes and becomes a backup somewhere else, and then ends up playing and lights up the scoreboard for 5 or 6 games again. That was his entire career. And Fitzpatrick knows what he's looking at because he's looking in the mirror.
What if Pete Carroll, who has a lot of influence on this franchise, as you know, 71 years old, be 72 this next year, contracted through 2025, has a decent amount of influence on this roster building situation. Start of it was, phase 1 was this last year. Geno Smith came through for him. He believed in him. He was one of the only ones that did. He's advocating for him now, wants him. It aligns with his timeline, which is we'd like to win in the next couple of seasons. Geno might give us the best chance to do that rather than depend on a rookie to come in and do that. Does that elevate Geno's position financially with the Seahawks?
No, not financially. Because again, you're looking at, there is one team. And the only way the Seahawks pay a lot is if they bid against themselves. Because they're not.
And they have done that before. Look at Will Disley's contract last year. I mean, I know it's a different position, different year, et cetera, but
yeah, and I think Will Disley's contract, people are like, oh, it's a terrible contract. And then you go look at league-wide where it sits, and also league-wide where he sits as far as talent and his ability to be a right tackle at times and get out and catch passes. He's an underrated, undervalued player in a lot of ways. And yeah, that contract's still kind of bad, but it's not as bad as others that are out there, and not nearly as bad as a $30 million Geno Smith contract would be. That would be catastrophic.
Yeah, if Disley was a free agent this year and out on the market at $9 million, he'd only be making less than Mike Gillespie and Dalton Schultz.
Yeah.
As far as
but you're looking at guys like Kelsey and Kittle are going to re-sign deals here soon, and those contracts are going to be massive.
That's
and
true.
Seahawks needed to get in with Disley before those contracts reset the market.
So we're fairly confident, Keith's fairly confident, that the Seahawks are going to have either a reasonable, quote unquote, contract for Geno, and it's not going to injure the franchise enough to prohibit us from doing things in free agency and moving forward with the bridge scenario, drafting a quarterback in this draft. And that's the way forward. I'm not quite as confident that it's going to be a contract we're all going to be able to say, yay, Seahawks got a great deal. I think it's going to be one of those where, wow, they really paid Geno. Now what? And I think I'm leaning more towards that as opposed to the 15 range, which was your bottom range. And so I'm a little worried. I'm a little worried that my franchise is going to make a mistake here. And
so one of the things,
I don't know what to do about it.
When I look at all this, Pete Carroll wants to win. That's what you were saying. His timeline is in the next, the next 3 years is what he's got, right? Till 2025. He wants to win. He knows he can't win with the out of defense. It's Pete freaking Carroll. He knows he can't win without a defense.
He's got great experience at that too, because the last 5 or 6 years, the defense has been crap.
Yeah, and it was worse last year than it's been like ever. And now you're going to gut that same defense in order to
It needs to be rebuilt. It just does.
in order to get under the salary cap. If you sign Geno Smith, you've got to gut that defense. You've got 2 new safeties that are in there. You're not going to have Shelby Harris or Quentin Jefferson on the front line. You're not going to have Bruce Irvin
or Poona Ford, possibly.
Yeah, Poona Ford's not going to be there. You're not going to have Bruce Irvin in at linebacker. You're going to be going with the young guys have to click in every position. And you look at, okay, these are major contributors on this defense. They were not the problem. Like, they were good players on a bad defense. And now you're going to get rid of them, and you're going to be left with mediocre players on a possibly historically bad defense. Pete Carroll knows you can't win that way. He's not going to let that things happen where his defense ends gutted and is one of the worst defenses of all time. It's not going to happen.
Yes, until you take a look at the 2024 and 2025 cap, salary caps for the Seahawks. We've got a lot of money in 2024, 2025, which makes me worry a little bit that instead of taking advantage of that cap savings to further build the team under a rookie contract for a quarterback, if they invest in Geno, lower the cap hit in 2023 so it doesn't look so bad and they can make some moves and push it out to 2024, 2025, I'm still not going to be happy. It's just not going to be great.
But even if they do that and they set it up in a way that's cap friendly for the team, you're still looking at 18 to 20 million in the first year if your AYP is going to be 32. And if you do that, you're going to have to gut the defense in order to
make. So I'm a little worried.
Actually, have a roster.
I'm still a little worried though that they will go down that road and try to make it work financially and pull strings and restructure and all that stuff, push money out in order to do this. I'm still a little worried that they will go down that road. I think it would be a mistake. Just a little worried.
Schneider's too smart to do that. And Pete Carroll knows that you can't gut the defense and expect to win anything. And he wants to win. And you don't win by having, a historically bad defense. You win by having a great defense and not turning the football over. That's Pete Carroll football.
Okay, you say those words. They sound great to me. When's the last time that actually happened?
It's been a while. But a lot of the reason why it didn't happen was because the Seahawks as a franchise had to go away from that in order to pay Russell Wilson what he wanted.
Yes, sir. Right there.
They traded Russell Wilson to get out of that.
Yes, they did.
Mess.
And now here we are with this situation with a quarterback that is not even on the same level. I know Russ struggled this last year, but come on. We couldn't do it with Russ at his premier.
Geno Smith at his best is nowhere close to Russell Wilson at his best.
Yes.
And
hopefully they understand that.
Yeah. Look at what Russell did the last couple of weeks after they fired Hackett. All of a sudden, he was a good quarterback again. In fact, he screwed Seattle over by winning in week 18 by putting up 31 points and getting a win that we didn't want him to get.
The interesting thing about this is this still has to be the first domino to fall. The interesting thing about timing wise is the franchise tag stuff happens the first week of March, right after the combine. Usually at the combine, you and I both know this. Executives are there. They get together. They talk behind closed doors, and they will probably establish value for Geno Smith at the combine, because agents will talk, owners will talk, executives will talk, and they will know kind of where they stand and where this thing's going to go.
Yeah.
And so after that, I would expect a deal fairly quickly. or they're going to let him test free agency. That's where I think this thing's going to go. If he goes out in free agency and tests the market, hopefully he gives the Seahawks the ability to match. If not, and he finds something else that's more lucrative, so be it.
Well, I think that if you're Geno Smith and your career was dead until Pete Carroll gave you a chance that no one thought you deserved, and you've talked about loyalty and all of that you would, if another team offered you a contract, you'd go to the Seahawks and say, hey, this is the offer. Can you match that? And give the Seahawks the ability to do that before they sign with someone else. And I think that the Seahawks don't need to rush this.
No.
And they can go ahead and let this play out.
But how do they go through free agency if Geno's going to go test the market and it takes them 2 weeks? How do they approach it? Because it really hamstrings them waiting for Geno.
They don't wait for Geno. Go ahead and approach free agency the way you would. And if it gets to the point where he's like, okay, I was asking for too much, I want to come down to this. And you're like, well, you know what? You took too long. We don't have that. So what if we restructure this deal and do it in this other way so we can actually get you under the salary cap? You have to just be like, you have to.
Dude, you missed your window.
On.
Yeah. I mean, you got to tell them, listen, this thing's going to move fast. We don't have time. You're going to have to make a decision, or you're not going to be back. You know.
And what we'll tell, what the big tell, if they get to that point, right? Free agency has started, and Geno's not signed. He's out testing the market. And the Seahawks go spend money on a guy like Jerron Payne, defensive tackle. It's going to take a bunch to sign him. And if they do that, what they're saying is, we don't have that much cap space, and we're not spending it on you. And they're telling Geno that he's going to make nothing, or he's going to go somewhere else. And honestly, if he goes anywhere else, he's probably a backup again. He doesn't want that.
Cool. Well, good, lively conversation. We had our differences. I think we were aligned on most of it.
I think you and I know that you're playing one side and I'm playing the other. I think both of us are a little more in the middle in terms of our actual, like, where we think this is going to go. But yeah. I like Geno Smith. He had a fantastic year, and I'm not trying to
Same.
I'm not trying to but when it comes to off-season roster building and cap management, I'm not spending money on it.
It's a different ballgame. What we're talking about here is different than appreciating somebody on the field. This is a business side of football. At the off-season, what we're talking about now is a business, and it's not so cut and dry. It's not so loyal in the NFL. Everyone obviously knows that, but sometimes you need to be reminded of that it is a business. It does come down to dollars and cents. It does come down to philosophy on how you build your roster and the health of your franchise long-term, not just for this year. And Geno may not fit into that window, and we all need to kind of come to terms with that. He may very well fit into that. And we just don't know exactly how that'll play out. I'm open to both sides currently, right now, almost equally to me. I would like to see them go in a certain direction, which is building through the draft, building up that defensive line, reallocating funds into the trenches if they're going to do something with the safeties, take that money and build this thing inside out. Geno may not be a part of that. I think either Drew Lock or another quarterback could get us a bridge, or maybe we do start the rookie right away. I don't know. I mean, we are a playoff team, but we obviously aren't a good playoff team. And I think we're a ways away in a number of different areas that we need to be able to address in the free agency and the draft.
I think it comes down to, you have to look at the gap between Seattle and San Francisco right now. And that's Seattle with Geno Smith and San Francisco with their third string quarterback. And San Francisco was significantly better in
Yes.
all 3 games that they played. They played
All
against
3 games.
They had one against Geno Smith, one against Jimmy Garoppolo, and one against Brock Purdy. And San Francisco was the significantly better team in all 3 games. And I think you have to look at that and go, if Geno is keeping us holding steady, it's not enough. We've got to get better. And I think that ultimately that's the thing, because Pete Carroll wants to win with defense.
That is the barometer.
Yep. It's defense, it's running the football, and it's not turning the ball over. And you don't do that by paying a quarterback $30 million. They figured that out with Russ. They traded him. They reset. They got all those rookies. Now they've got all these draft picks. They need to continue to make that push and continue to build this team the right way. And I think they will.
Find Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. You can find me at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. Find us on your favorite podcast platform and YouTube, and hit that subscribe button. And we'll have some good shows upcoming. Just talking about players. We got the Senior Bowl coming up at the end of the month. Practices start soon. We'll be talking about all of that, as well as the combine in early February, mid-February. And fun time of the year. So this conversation is not over. We will be talking about this, I'm sure.
Everybody's going to be talking about this. This is the question that dominates Seattle's offseason right now. Just like last year, the topic was trading Russell Wilson. What are you going to get for him? All of that. Like, that was the topic last year. Now it's, what do they do with Geno? Because he outperformed everyone's expectations.
Yeah. Nuts. Fun. All right. Let's get out of here. See you later, Keith. Take care, guys. Go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.